My name's Corey and I'm an addict. The process of my addiction started early. My history goes back into various times where I was born, and my mom and dad are from two diverse population groups. My mom was a hippie, my dad was a jarhead. So growing up, I had this dichotomy of messages. I like to joke around and say that my motto in my house was make love and war. That message was, it was okay to have fun, but it was also that I was expected to be a young man, that I was expected to have certain parameters and act in a certain way. The goal was to get away from whatever was going on, from whatever that, acting as that young adult, that young man my entire life caused me to want to have some escape. I was an only child, so I didn't have the brothers and sisters to rely on to take me into childhood. I had to escape into my own fantasy world. We did a lot of moving around. I spent 12 different, I went to 13 different schools within 12 years. The Marine Corps kept us busy. I bounced from coast to coast. The unique part about that, though, is that I became a storyteller. I would take every story from the previous duty station. I would take out the person that was integral in it, the main character, and I would insert myself. I've had to go back and look at some of the stories and get called on some of them and told that they were utter crap because it didn't happen to me, and for 30 years I thought they did. My very first experience with anything of a narcotic substance was, I was 8 years old, and we were in Cherry Point, North Carolina. We were stationed there. We were living at base housing, and we had a couple of my buddies and I had found an old bomb shelter that was behind the base housing. So we go into the bomb shelter. We're playing war or doing something silly that young kids and young boys do, and we had our little brother there, and we were able to slide him between the slats, the bars, and we slid him into the bomb shelter so he could open up the door. So he gets in there and opens the door up. And so we all go in there and we find this big old box of candy. And this candy's been left over since World War II. And it was an appetite suppressant candy. The Germans used it. The Japanese created it. Come to find out, it was most likely methamphetamine candy that was laced with methamphetamine in order to act as an appetite suppressant. I remember we ate a couple pieces apiece, and that I wasn't hungry and I didn't sleep for 2 days. So that's what leads me to believe even more that it was a methamphetamine-based candy. Not that I started active addiction there, because I really didn't, but that was my first taste of a substance that gave me a head change, that changed the way I felt about myself, that changed the ability to perceive my world. After that, I started smoking cigarettes up in the mountains of North Carolina with one of my cousins. That was just something to do. We hid underneath one of the roadside stands that they used to have up there. We would sneak cigarettes, we'd smoke cigarettes, we'd do whatever we wanted to do. Steal a few sips of beer here and there. The first time I smoked pot was probably around 12 years old. Snuck into, it was in a playground behind a friend's house. We were I was hanging out with a little bit of an older crowd because he had older brothers, and they were smoking pot, and my friend didn't want to, but I had a desperate need to fit in. I started with alcohol, and then I got tired of trying to drive home drunk. I was worried that my dad would notice, but I wanted to drink more. So I would do cocaine and methamphetamine because that would allow me to drink more, and I thought that I could function better. It was a weekend thing. I didn't do it during the week, or if I did, it was rare. So all through high school, I was a binge user, a binge drinker. So my use starts to progress. It goes from a weekend basis to an almost daily basis. Whether it's alcohol, whether it's pot, whether it's cocaine, whether it's meth, whether it's mushrooms, whether it's acid, I'm doing whatever I can get my hands on. So when I say my drug of choice is whatever you have, it really was, because whatever you had and I was with you, I wanted to fit in with you. I wanted to be like you. I wanted to assimilate into whatever that culture was. If we were watching The Jungle Book and drinking Robitussin, that's what we were doing. I basically would surround myself with people who I deemed not less than, but worse off, so I didn't feel as bad about myself, because I was like, well, they're worse off than I am. It's not as bad. I haven't gotten there yet. I haven't fallen to those depths of degradation yet. I've still got some redeeming qualities to myself. I was only kidding myself. I was only fooling myself. Everything came to a head in August of 1988. My mom was noticing that stuff was missing around the house. Some of the guns that were in the house were no longer there because I had pawned them and given them to drug dealers in exchange for drugs. Spent every dime I had ever gotten. I had no savings, and I was supposed to be going back to college in a week, and I was scared. And I went to my mom and I was like, Mom, I need money. And she's like, I'm not giving you any money. I said, listen, bitch, I need $20. I need to go get a rock. I'm smoking crack and I don't care what it takes. You're giving me money. And she starts crying and she starts screaming, why? And I'd never lay a hand on her. I would never do that. And I didn't. But I was like, just give me the fucking money. Just give me the money. So she goes into her purse and she pulls out money and she throws it at me and it hits the ground. I don't even think twice about it. I reach down, pick it up, and walk out the door. The weird thing about addiction is that you can be in the midst of your withdrawal, and the minute I knew that I had the ability to get the drugs that I wanted, even just having the money on me and in the car, the withdrawal goes away. The craving goes away, it subsides. I'm able to relax, go, okay, it's coming. My fix is coming and I just need to go get it. Was gone for about a day and a half. Come strolling home, use my key, unlock the door, walk up the stairs. Mind you, my mom had gotten married earlier that year to another guy who I was working for somewhat. I come up the stairs and the wrong guy's in the house. My dad is sitting at the kitchen table. I can't process that he's there. Because first, I haven't been to sleep in, day and a half, 2 days. The wrong guy's in the wrong house. He's got a briefcase open right there. He's just, it's wrong. I'm trying to figure out what happened. So my dad looks at me and says, looks like you got a problem. And I'm like, yeah. And I start coming clean. He's like, what's going on? And my mom had filled him in and he was just trying to get the answers from me. And I was like, I'm smoking crack. I don't know what happened. I don't know how I got here. I don't know what's going on. And he looks at me and he's like, you got two choices, son. And he's like, I got plane tickets right here and I got handcuffs. You can come willingly or unwillingly. And I chose to go willingly. Within the next 72 hours, I was placed in a treatment center down in San Diego County. And I started the process. I did a 28-day treatment program down there. And I started my first journey into recovery. The family groups were interesting. The process groups, the understanding and learning about addiction. But here I am, I'm 19 years old. I don't think I've got a problem. I might have a problem with smoking crack cocaine, and that's just because I was doing crack cocaine. I still didn't associate any of my alcohol or powdered cocaine or acid or any of the other substances that I was doing as a problem. I didn't associate alcohol as a problem. But I knew I was under 21, so I shouldn't be drinking. So subconsciously, I made a reservation that I'll just stay sober until I'm 21. I got out of that treatment center, moved into a halfway house up in Orange County. Lived there for about 4 months, about 3.5 months, got kicked out for having a relationship with a female there. It was a co-ed halfway house. It's all too often and too common of a story. The recovery teaches us not to get in a relationship for our first year, and nobody really follows it because nobody believes it, but we really should. The young girl in question and I both got kicked out. Her drug of choice was heroin. And mine wasn't, so we really didn't, I wasn't ready to, I was still working a program. She wasn't. About a week after she got kicked out, she overdosed and died. I think if that hadn't happened, I probably would have gone out sooner, but that fear right there kept me in the rooms. I got a job, I was doing everything you're supposed to be doing. And one Sunday, or it wasn't even a Sunday, it was either a Friday or Saturday, because it was the Army-Navy football game was on. So I know it was in November. It was November of '89. It was over a year later. I'm sitting there watching the Army-Navy football game, and I'm living with this beautiful older Italian woman, and she looks at me and she's like, "How come you never joined the military?" Like, I got really defensive. My dad being the Marine, I bitched her out a little bit, jumped off the couch and left the apartment. And we were living in Laguna Niguel at the time, and we drove down to the beach, or I drove down to the beach. She wasn't with me. Sat on the rocks, watched the sunset, and started contemplating what I was doing with my life. But I really had no direction. So I decided, on a whim, because I'm kind of impulsive, to join the Marine Corps. So I went and took the ASVAB and did the testing and did everything that I needed to do. Walked in there and I was completely brutally honest. I walked in and said to the recruiter, "I'm an addict. I'm in recovery. I haven't used." And he's like, "You need to walk back out. And you need to walk back in and tell me the only thing you ever done is smoke pot." So I did. I walked back out those doors, walked back in and said, "The only thing I've ever smoked is pot." He's like, "Son, I've got a deal for you." And next thing I know, January of 1990, I went to boot camp, graduated boot camp in April, and I was a United States Marine. April 20th of 1990 was one of the few times, or actually that date, the day I graduated boot camp, the day I walked across the grinder, which is the name for the parade deck, at MCRD San Diego, the pride that I saw in my dad's eyes, that overwhelming sense of I finally did something right, was its own rush. So I have a tendency to train wreck things when I think they're getting too successful, because I want to be able to look back at it and say, "See, I told you it was going to fail. I'll wreck it on purpose." So I turned 21 in July of '90. Went out and got so blitzed on my 21st birthday that I don't even remember it. I don't remember getting home. I just remember waking up and I still have the scar on my shin because I was too drunk to get in bed. So I fell halfway on, and the beds were made of metal. It was military, so of course they're made of metal. Don't even remember it. Just don't. It's gone. Blackout. I've had many blackouts, just not even gray outs, just complete lack of recollection for what transpired. I've done the walk around my car looking for damage because I don't know how I got home. I've done the walk around looking for my car because I don't know where I parked it. I've had those experiences, and it wasn't enough to stop me.